Hello, and welcome to AI Storytime, where we prompt AIs with images or art and tell it to make up a story. Today we have Grant Wood's iconic 1930 painting, American Gothic, which portrays a stern-faced farmer holding a pitchfork and a woman standing stoically before a house with a distinctive Gothic window, symbolizing the enduring and sometimes rigid character of rural American life. Please enjoy.
In the quiet hamlet of Willow Creek, nestled deep in the rolling hills of Iowa, where the cornfields stretched like golden oceans under the vast Midwestern sky, stood the old Carpenter Gothic house. Its white clapboard siding gleamed faintly in the afternoon sun, the pointed arched window on the upper story gazing out like a solemn eye framed by the steep gabled roof that pierced the heavens. A weather vane creaked lazily atop the peak, pointing northward as if warning of incoming storms. Behind the house, a red barn loomed in the distance, its roof sagging under the weight of years, surrounded by clusters of emerald trees that rustled with the secrets of generations past. Elijah Hawthorne, a man carved from the very earth he tilled, stood sentinel on the front porch. His bald head shone with a sheen of sweat, his wire-rimmed spectacles perched low on his nose, magnifying eyes that had seen too many harsh winters and failed crops. His face was a map of wrinkles, each line etched by the relentless toil of farm life. He wore his Sunday best, a black jacket over faded blue overalls, though it was a weekday, as if anticipating confrontation. In his gnarled hands, he clutched a three-tined pitchfork, its wooden handle worn smooth from decades of use, not for haying today, but as a symbol of defiance, a makeshift weapon against the invisible forces threatening to uproot his world. Beside him was his daughter, Clara Hawthorne, a woman in her early 30s whose stern expression belied the quiet fire burning within. Her blonde hair was pulled back into a tight bun, strands escaping like whispers of rebellion. She wore a simple brown calico dress, its white collar crisp and starched, adorned with a scalloped trim that spoke of handmade care. Pinned at her throat was her mother's cameo brooch, an oval of carved shell depicting a serene profile, a heirloom passed down from a time when life on the farm held more promise than peril. Clara's blue eyes, sharp and unyielding, stared straight ahead, her lips set in a thin line that hid the turmoil of unspoken dreams. The year was 1932, and the Great Depression had sunk its teeth into the heartland, compounded by the Dust Bowl's merciless advance. Black blizzards of soil choked the air, turning noon to twilight and burying fences under drifts of despair. The Hawthorns' once fertile fields lay fallow, cracked, and barren, the wind howling through them like a mournful dirge. Elijah had buried his wife, Eliza, 5 years prior in the family plot behind the barn. Her life claimed by a fever that no herbal remedy or distant doctor could staunch. Since then, the farm had become a fortress, Elijah its unyielding guardian, and Clara its reluctant inheritor. But on this particular afternoon, as the sun hung heavy in a cloudless sky, it wasn't the drought that cast long shadows over their faces. It was the rumble of the noon train, echoing from the depot a mile away, bringing with it a stranger from the bustling streets of Chicago. He stepped off the platform in a pinstripe suit, tailored sharp as a knife, his fedora tilted at a confident angle, a leather briefcase swinging at his side like a pendulum of fate. His name was Harlan Voss, a land speculator with a silver tongue and eyes that gleamed with avarice. He represented a consortium of industrialists, eager to swallow up rural America, in the name of progress. Factories belching smoke, assembly lines churning out machines to replace the calloused hands of farmers. Voss had heard whispers of Willow Creek's prime location: flat land near the railroad, water from the nearby creek, and families desperate enough to sell. He approached the Hawthorne farm with a practiced smile, his polished shoes kicking up dust on the gravel path. "Good day, folks," he called out, tipping his hat. "Name's Harlan Voss with Midwest Development. I've got an offer that'll change your lives." Elijah's grip tightened on the pitchfork, his knuckles whitening. He remembered men like Voss from the war years, profiteers who preyed on the vulnerable while others fought in trenches overseas. "We ain't interested in change," Elijah replied, his voice gravelly, laced with the accent of lifelong Iowans. "This land's been Hawthorne soil for 3 generations. It stays that way." Clara remained silent at first, her hands clasped in front of her apron, but her mind raced. She had grown up under her father's strict code: work from dawn to dusk, speak little, endure much. Yet in stolen moments she devoured books borrowed from the one-room library in town, stories of suffragettes, marching in New York, flappers, dancing in speakeasies, women forging paths beyond the plow. The farm felt like a cage, its bars forged from duty and tradition. Part of her wondered if Voss's promises held a key to freedom: money to escape to the city, perhaps study at a women's college, or even start a small business, mending clothes with the sewing skills her mother had taught her. Voss chuckled, unfazed, pulling papers from his briefcase. "Now, Mr. Hawthorne, let's be reasonable. The Dust Bowl's got you by the throat. Sell now, and you'll have cash for a fresh start. We're talking jobs, hundreds of them. Factories making tractors, not breaking backs. Your daughter here could have a real future, not slaving away in the dirt." The words stung Clara like a hornet. She glanced at her father, seeing the flicker of pain in his eyes, not just from the insult, but from the truth buried within. Elijah had always dreamed of passing the farm to a son, but Clara was all he had left after her brothers perished young. One to influenza, the other to a threshing accident. She stepped forward slightly, her voice emerging steady despite the knot in her stomach. "We've weathered worse than dust and empty pockets, Mr. Voss. This isn't just soil, it's our bloodline." Voss's smile faltered, turning to a sneer. "Bloodline? You're relics, folks. The world's moving on. Electricity, automobiles, radio waves crackling with news from afar. Cling to your pitchfork if you must, but progress waits for no man. Or woman." He eyed Clara dismissively, as if she were merely an extension of the farm's outdated machinery. That was the spark. Clara's cheeks flushed, not with embarrassment, but with resolve. She placed a hand on her father's arm, feeling the tension in his muscles. "Relics? We've built this nation with our hands, while men like you scheme in boardrooms. This house, this land, it's more than bricks and earth. It's home, and homes don't surrender. They fight back." Elijah nodded, a rare spark of pride softening his gaze. Together they stood immovable, their stares boring into Voss like the tines of the pitchfork. The speculator shifted uncomfortably, the silence heavier than the humid air. He muttered something about foolish pride and turned on his heel, retreating to the train that would carry him back to his concrete jungle. As the whistle faded into the distance, father and daughter lingered on the porch. The sun dipped lower, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, casting long shadows over the fields. Elijah set the pitchfork against the wall, its metal glinting like a faithful guardian. "You spoke true, girl," he said softly, the words a balm after years of sparse affection. Clara smiled faintly, the first crack in her stoic facade. "We both did, Pa. Maybe change comes, but on our terms." In the months that followed, Willow Creek rallied. Neighbors, inspired by the Hawthorne stand, formed cooperatives to share resources, bartering seeds and labor to coax life from the parched ground. Clara began teaching reading classes in the church basement, smuggling in progressive pamphlets that spoke of workers' rights and women's votes. Elijah, in his quiet way, started experimenting with contour plowing, a technique he'd read about in an old almanac to hold the soil against the wind. Years later, when the rains returned and the depression eased, Clara married a local teacher, raising children who grew up hearing tales of that fateful day. The old Gothic house stood firm, its window still watching over the land, and in family gatherings around the hearth, they'd recount how a father and daughter, armed with nothing but a pitchfork and unyielding wills, turned back the tide of so-called progress, proving that the truest strength lay not in machines or money, but in the unbreakable bonds of home and heart. The story became legend in Willow Creek, a reminder that even in the face of encroaching shadows, a simple, steadfast stare could reshape destiny itself.